a lot of this is housed. And certainly we all know that there's a good bit of throughput through our organizations with staff turnover and board turnover and volunteer turnover and so on. So I think this is very representative of what our research tells us as well. So I have you ask yourself the question again, where is your content? And as Becky said, it's likely in dozens of places. Likely your inbox resembles mine, especially if you're leading your organization and managing all of your different stakeholder constituencies, as I am with Box.org. So that, 100,000 total there of what's in the inbox, you can bet a lot of pertinent and important attachments are there, not to mention personal storage mechanisms. I thought this was a clever 1970s or 1980s Microsoft logo, just in that many of us are working on editions of Microsoft's productivity suite, that are many years dated. Or worst but case scenario is these massive nest of wires in this server that many of us understand here on the left side of the slide. So this is likely where our content is today. Fortunately, there are great services now in the marketplace that are allowing us to centralize, as the graphic on the left side of this visual portrays, in one place. So now our content can live and be securely housed in one central repository that can be accessed by any device by internal and external collaborators on a controlled basis. So in this slide, you're seeing the ways that I feel those primary external constituencies are interacting with all this great content that we produce and share with them. So be it the green box of creating our income and building capacity financially, lots of interactions there, lots of pitch proposals and grant management that occurs, lots of collaboration using files and content. Same with the admin side, as we're onboarding people or interacting with the board on a monthly basis with their meeting minutes, budget updates, and so on. On the program side, certainly don't want to leave that out. That's the primary driver of lots of collaborative file management or storage of forms or surveys or outcome or impact analysis, or volunteer readiness documents or maps or videos instructing our volunteers on how to do our great work. And last but not least, the place that files and content is especially utilized is in the communications and marketing effort of telling our story. And so the goal is for all of the content related to these stakeholders, internally or externally, to be housed in one secure place. And that's what the tips at the latter part of today's call are really all going to be devoted to. So we feel like this notion of cloud content management and collaboration is, by definition, the offering of a central repository for you to start housing all of your content, and then to internally and externally collaborate on that content. And I'll tell you more about definitionally what that means in a moment. But also is this notion of now accessing our content. And we all know it's very hard sometimes when we're not logged into our organization's network. If we're fortunate to have a secure network for our organization and we can't get to files, it's especially difficult to dig a file out of a board member's inbox remotely. And so that's where that access and mobility piece, especially if we're dispersed or have teams on the ground doing important work or raising money, able to access our files. So cloud content management and collaboration is enabling nonprofits to effectively manage programs and the content associated, or the knowledge associated with development and content there, or the ability to communicate and share the story, be it the collection of photographs from our events and from our work back to marketing volunteers or marketing staff members that then transition those to websites. That whole process can either be riddled with cost and complexity and lost files and insecure transmission of files, or it can be tidied up significantly. And so this notion also then in the bottom left of this diagram of accessing by all stakeholders becomes especially important when you have a staff of 1 or 1,000 and volunteers and board members numbering between 1 to 5 or 500 to 1,000. You can bet that those entities have different computers, running different browsers, running different productivity software, running different phones, be they the Apple variety or the Android variety, or iPads and the explosion of tablets and Google Books and all these great things that have come out onto the marketplace, the Chromebooks. And so the notion is here we want to try and centralize this important mix of securing and centralizing our content and the collaboration on it, but also keeping that amazing ease of use out there for our board members or our volunteers or our staff who may not have the latest and the greatest suite of solutions or the latest and greatest phone or the most sophisticated technology background. So I know that's a very dense theme to cover on today's call, but I really wanted to get into defining what is cloud content management and collaboration. And I hope that started to at least define it a little bit and help you understand why more and more nonprofit organizations are starting to understand in this era of security scare, in this era of accessing our mission and doing our work 24 hours a day and needing to access our files across a broad, diverse constituency is becoming top of mind. And so I have the great pleasure now of turning it over to Tony from GuideStar to talk a little bit about their cloud content management and collaboration history. And so with that, Tony, I'll pass the microphone to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, TechSoup. I'm going to just spend 5 minutes here to introduce GuideStar for those of us who don't know it, give a little background on scaling content in the sector, and then focus on how we're using Box today and the cloud in general, and then conclude with kind of the importance of collaboration, which can sometimes seem like a buzzword, but I'm going to try to give it a little bit more specificity. So GuideStar, for those of you who don't know us, is recognized as the leading source of nonprofit information in the U.S. on nonprofits. We have about 1.5 million 501c3s, and so those are the organizations like yourselves on the phone who are for public benefit and known as nonprofits in general. We have and pursue a charitable mission to connect people, organizations, and businesses with information on the work that you guys are doing, so on your programs, your finances, and on the impact that you're delivering. There are more than 2 million organizations in our entire database, and that would include some of the tax-exempt associations and universities and other business groups that are also tax-exempt. All told, GuideStar is about an $11 million organization, so we consider ourselves mid-size. What's unique about GuideStar is that $9 million of our total operating budget is earned income. So we have a hybrid business model where we leverage and license the database that we have aggregated and display, and that's being paid for mostly by professional philanthropy, commercial applications who are also kind of engaging the sector in many different commercial ways. But what's most important about that mention is that GuideStar, first and foremost, is also a nonprofit. In front of you, you have a slide that kind of just alludes to some of the demographics and more numbers that I think are important for us to share. The importance of nonprofits in the sector is huge. It represents about $1 trillion in economic activity. We also employ about 11 million people in the U.S., or 10% of the workforce. The scale of the sector is immense. And as you think about the sector, we also have a lot of challenges and issues, primarily being that it's a highly fragmented sector. One of the things that is always startling to me that of the 1.5 million 501c3 nonprofits, 1.3 million of those are 500,000 in total operating budget and below. So it's a lot of really small, scrappy, very important nonprofits that are accomplishing a lot of work, typically under-resourced, and typically, the staff is doing more than one job. In contrast, just going to give you guys a little bit of background, small businesses in the U.S. represent about 28 million companies. So 1.3 million versus 28 million. So even though there's many of us, we are dwarfed by kind of the business sector. And when you furthermore consider that IT spending per employee in the nonprofit sector is about $2,200 per employee in comparison to the lowest sector in the business economy is about $4,500 per sector. Where you spend your money and how you spend your money in support of your mission is critically important. So the key takeaways kind of from just the demographics and what the sector looks like to kind of benchmark or think about yourselves is, it's highly diverse and fragmented. We are severely typically underfunded when it comes to what we spend on hardware and software, tools to help us accomplish our mission, particularly around the kind of the collaborative piece that we'll get into. And so the cloud, particularly Box and the features that it has, kind of allow you to engage in world-class infrastructure, that's available to kind of some of the leading companies. On my next slide, we can look at GuideStar and how we're using the cloud for file share and content management. If this webinar had been given in January, I would probably announce that we're one of Box's newest customers. So that's how new GuideStar is to taking advantage of software like Box. Now, needless to say, when I actually participated in the poll, when Brian asked us how many, where do our files and our content live today, GuideStar fell into 6 to 10 places, and we were being conservative. I have a couple colleagues in the room with me, and we were shouting out where we know, just the four of us know where we have files on. And what's interesting about that is that, if you're a small startup, you'll probably have a better chance that your files exist in less places. But as you can see, even a mid-sized organization like GuideStar tends to struggle with centralization and all the kind of key benefits that come with that. What I'm going to talk about today is just in our first 3 months of Box, kind of how we've decided to kind of bring this software and the cloud into GuideStar. Since we're using it across many different departments and everybody potentially may have already been using another platform, the way GuideStar has started to use it is very specific applications. So we're using it to disperse and manage information to our board of directors. So everything from a board packet to our prior to our meetings to kind of financials and then to training materials that helps them understand the work of GuideStar. We also use it within kind of company culture. So we have 3 offices at GuideStar, and we share files, which are typically big documents across the company by putting little folders of kind of the events that are happening in each office. And next, we're starting to use it within a very specific group at GuideStar. It's the foundation membership group, and so we have many external stakeholders. Foundations represent about 10% of our annual budget in terms of contribution and support, and so these kind of supporters often need plenty of information, kind of updates from us, and that's kind of the preferred way for us, we think, moving forward. Ultimately, we hope that Box will be the one centralized place where we can store kind of our files and our information. So that becomes, that's more of a kind of a best practice to how to bring your bigger organization on to leverage the tools that are made available via the cloud. With respect to kind of how we're using it today, the 3 factors that when we decided to kind of start adopting the cloud was the ease of use was number 1. Since there are other people in the company already using other platforms, basically the use, the look and feel, how effective it is, how quick it is to manage, how easy it is to kind of modify and customize and make it look the way you want it to look is very important to us. Secondly, security. Obviously, Brian kind of put up all the benefits of all kind of cloud systems, particularly Boxes. Security is super important. And then lastly was the ability to kind of access it from any device. So whether it be laptop, mobile phone, internet, or even kind of downloading an app that allows you to kind of just sync from your desktop whenever you log in. And then lastly, we appreciate it, and this is sometimes overlooked because it almost is becoming common sense, is it ultimately saves you money. And getting back to kind of IT spend and how the sector is underfunded, it's very important to kind of be as effective as you can be. So that is GuideStar's first 3 months on Box, and we're very excited. We love the feature set. We love the way it works and how it looks and feels. My next slide, I'm going to talk to you I'm a little jealous of Brian's animated map. This is ours, which is also, it's not animated, but it's interactive. And this is not a live link to it, but what you can see here is the way GuideStar has started thinking about internal collaboration is each employee is connected to many different groups and many different initiatives and many different objectives. And so I'm highlighted in the screenshot that you're looking at, and these are all the people that I'm working with across departments and across the company that ultimately will reflect on success of the work that I'm responsible for within the organization. And if you were to look at the interactive version of this map. Once you selected another individual, then their kind of connections would also become active. And you can see on the left-hand side the general kind of groupings of the work that we're all engaged in internally. So internal collaboration across different offices, remote employees, contractors, consultants, all of that becomes very, very important with respect to kind of content. Brian was talking about all devices now essentially create or generate content, and you multiply that by 100, 1,000 times when you have larger organizations, when you engage ad hoc committees, when you engage volunteers, when you engage external stakeholders, and that's what my next slide kind of depicts and talks about. External collaboration has become increasingly important for GuideStar. The mission that GuideStar is trying to solve by building kind of the information infrastructure that will support all nonprofits, that will support all kind of leading measures of impact and effectiveness is what we're trying to build, continue to build in the sector. What you see here is how we have diagrammed information flow as it's generated from donors all the way across to all the way across to kind of the professional philanthropy in the middle, GuideStar next, and then ultimately to its beneficiaries. All along those kind of paths, there's content and information being generated. Some of that will end up in GuideStar's database. Some of that will end up in kind of these content, whether they be files or images or reports, that ultimately will have to be made accessible to kind of our partners, our customers, our supporters, anybody who needs access to that information. And that's really where kind of Box and any sort of external community that we participate in it will live. So with respect to kind of more thoughts on collaboration, there was a recent kind of article in Forbes Insights that talked about the top 5 trends. I think they interviewed quite a few organizations and thought leaders in the space, but the top 5 trends that are emerging in modern philanthropy, number 2 and number 3 talked about collaboration. And it's basically,